we're gonna be discussing the CSA business case. And we're starting with the questions, right? Because this is something that we're gonna be trying to answer with this presentation. And the idea is that you have a tool that help you to plan your company next move, following a data-driven decision-making approach. I am Ricardo Torres-Rivera. I am the president and CEO of Civalix Consulting. All right. Moving forward, so these here are the webinar topics that we're going to be covering here today in this presentation. So what are you going to be learning, right? What are my expectation with this content that I'm sharing with you for you to learn? So the idea is to review briefly the CSA framework per the FDA draft guidance recently released. We're going to be pointing out some CSA benefits. We're going to be actually explaining what is and why your company needs a CSA business case. And we're going to be outlining examples of implementation strategies that you can actually um, do right at your company to start implementing CSA. Right. Okay. So basically, just a couple of minutes for you to introduce my project, which is Civalix Consulting. So about Civalix, so Civalix Consulting is a dynamic human capital center, innovation-driven and result-oriented company in the life science industry, and we deliver quality life science services and support our clients in their mission to improve people's lives. So we have two pillars or values that we actually drive our business: is innovation, human capital, our results. So why Civalix? So we propel your strategy horsepower. Civalix is more than a staffing agency. We are an end-to-end project-driven service delivery partner. And then our KPI for success and value creation are total project delivery within agreed timeline and budget, total system validated, and total system put into service. So we have to make sure that you bring us in to help you with the project. That project can start to give you value as soon as possible, especially to make sure you get the system to put into service. Our capabilities are computer system validation, computer software assurance, data integrity, risk management consulting, program and project management, quality and compliance regulatory services, digital transformation, information technology, and cloud computing and cybersecurity consulting services. All right, so that was about Civalix. Let's get now into the guidance, right? Let's review the drive guidance basics, right? For this particular training, and just for the sake of time, to make this most of the time that we have already, I'm skipping all the background information regarding where this is coming from. Let's jump in directly into the guidance. All right. So let's first discuss what is computer software assurance per the guidance. So CSA is a risk-based approach for establishing and maintaining confidence that software is fit for intended use. CSA considers the risk of compromised safety and quality of the device should the software fail to perform as intended to determine the level of assurance effort and activities appropriate to establish confidence in the software. Here, I would like to say something regarding, these two statements right here, for many of us that have been in the industry for long, this is nothing new. So basically, when we're seeing this, we have been working with the risk-based approach for more than 15 years now. And what happened when we are seeing this, well, but this is nothing new, right? There's nothing new under the sun. But what happened is that when we understand that the FDA nailed it and we make CSA make sense, is because when we are seeing this, because the CSA effort is risk-based, it follows a least burdensome approach where the burden of validation is no more than necessary to address risk. I think it's very important that we understand this, because what happened is that the background of this is that the industry has been doing more than necessary for computer system validation. So CSA provides us an opportunity to actually have kind of like a actually way for implementing or doing the assurance activities according to risks. So finally, we're seeing from the FDA some direction, some guidance regarding how we can actually commiserate the testing activities in according to the risk level to the application that we're working with. And there's actually a highlight this here again because this is my understanding, and some of the peers shares in the industry share that this is one of the values of the FDA guidance. All right, so CSA focus on quality. The CSA approach focuses a high priority on those areas affecting patient safety and product quality. The approach supports the efficient use of resources in turning or promoting product quality. This differentiates from the traditional CSB, where focus was placed most heavily on documentation. And it might be possible that some of you have seen this triangle before, in which we're saying, well, on the traditional CSB, the focus was placed mostly on documentation, then testing, and then risk assessment, right? So now under CSA, we're flipping the approach that we conduct assurance activities for computer system or software, and we're saying no, we have to spend more time on risk-based approach, critical thinking, testing and assurance, and then the documentation. So this is a change in mindset, right? In terms of how we are going to be performing software verification activities. Um, I would like to say this if in terms of comparing the two approaches. So on the traditional CSB, we typically used to ask ourselves, well, what documentation do we need to generate to demonstrate that the system works as intended, right? And now under CSA, the question is, what verification activities needs to be performed to assure system work as intended and those does not compromise patient safety. So if you see this is a change of mindset of paradigm and under from traditional CSB to CSA, and it's a way to understand the difference between the two. Okay, some CSA additional considerations. The CSA scope is not applicable to medical device only. FDA-regulated companies outside the medical device spectrum can start implementing CSA, and you'll see when the FDA is actually going out to promote CSA, they are actually communicating this to the industry. CSA is a guidance, not the law. It's important to understand this. Guidance documents represent the FDA current thinking on a topic. Regulated companies can use alternative approach if the approach satisfies the requirement of the applicable statuses and regulation, right? But the thing is that, okay, it's a guidance, but what the good thing with the CSAs is that for the companies to understand is that you might be doing some traditional CSB at the moment, which is in accordance with good to satisfy the FDA regulation, but probably your company is doing more than necessary as part of the validation activity. So CSA provides an opportunity to actually to expedite the way the computer system validation or computer software assurance is being performed. CSA guidance supports leveraging activities performed by other entities, for example, developers and suppliers. Following a risk-based approach should prevent performance of additional unnecessary assurance activities. And we can have more discussion regarding on how to perform this, but it's very important that when you perform the critical thinking, understand, okay, which particular activity were already performed by the vendor, so we don't have to actually repeat those unnecessarily as part of the assurance activities that we perform in on our sites in our companies. Okay, moving forward. All right, so let's jump in right now to discuss the CSA framework. Um, so the framework provides us a risk-based approach for CSA, right? And this is actually when you look to the guidance, you see this as a main topic, which is the CSA framework. But then this framework is actually has four section that my invitation to you is to read those as steps, right? And then you see a flow, kind of a decision making through a flow chart in which you're going to be asking to your software this particular question, and you're going to make in order to ensure, okay, what assurance activities we need to perform, right? So when you read the framework, my invitation to you is just ask the first question. The first thing is identify the intended use of that system or the software. Determine the risk-based approach is your second step. Then determine the appropriate assurance activities, and finally, based on this, you're going to be establishing the appropriate record. And we're going to be jumping into discussing this more in detail through our presentation in the next slides. And just for clarity, and I'm gonna be this section establishing the appropriate record is out of the scope of this webinar because we're focusing right now in just making sure that you help your business to take a decision if it's good or not to move forward with the CSA implementation on your side. Perfect. All right. Moving forward, okay. The first step that we have, we were mentioning regarding in the framework is identify the intended use of the system. And the purpose of this is to determine whether the requirement for validations applies. So the idea is that we start to perform a screening to determine, well, if this is an actual application that is subject to FDA, is supports an FDA regulated process, right? And it's kind of to determine, well, if it does, it's within the scope of CSA, and actually it has to be validated and it's within the scope of the CSA. So in the guidance, what happened is that this is our first question. Okay, our first step is to identify, okay, do we need to validate this software that we're working with? So the first question is that does that software, right? Do that software directly use as part of production or quality system? If the question is yes, then we know that the guidance is say validation requirement applies. It's not, we have another question to ask, which is software support production or quality system? If the question is yes, then that validation requirement applies, and we should keep actually working with that. We keep actually screening down the our software to see how we're going to be performing activities under CSA. And here, if the system is not doesn't need validation, right, per FDA validation requirement, because these two questions are no, well, what happened is that it's not that the system doesn't need to be validated; it's that the system has not to be validated per the F requirement. I would recommend you to for this kind of system. There's some recommendation in the guidance on how to actually testing assurance for those, but I would like to recommend you to take a look to GAMP 5 to second edition, because Appendix M category and software and hardware, because GAMP 5 actually has bring to us is now providing some guidance on actually how to verify, right, actually the children's activities needed for category 1 software. I think also that and actually I like to mention here too that in terms of the category 1 software that typically used to be category 3 right now are now category 1. For example, validation life management systems like Genesis, for example, I think right now, I mean, for the guidance, they fit right now as a category number 1. So the validations activities to need being performed by GAM 5 is actually kind of reduced and expedite. So that's why I bring it to the table this, because it works to see GAM 5 second edition. All right. Moving forward, determining the risk-based approach is our second step in our framework. So let's keep actually, continue with our step, right? So we determine that the system has to be software validation applies, and this came actually from the first section. And the purpose of this is to perform a risk-based analysis, and I'll stop there, right? And then, of course, is to determine the appropriate assurance activities, but that happens on the next step. The idea here is that we have to make sure, okay, what happens if the software fails? Failure may compromise the patient's safety. That's a question that we have to make to determine, well, if that particular software that we're working with and a failure may compromise patient safety, then we are dealing with a high process risk. If not, then we are dealing with a software that is not high process risk. And the guidance there is mentioning that this kind of a binary approach is either one or the other, right? And I think I like this because it helps us to focus. Okay, let's go this. If it's high process risk, we have to perform this kind of testing. If it's not high process risk, we perform this other kind of testing, right? Okay, so basically, after performing our risk-based determination analysis for that particular software that we're working with, we move to section C for the CSA. So now that we're here in this section in which we are determining the appropriate assurance of activities. And the purpose is to identify, okay, what do we need to perform? And let's say about assurance of activities, let's think about testing, right? Which testing approach should we actually perform based on the risk that we are working with? Because what happened is that, okay, um, for the guidance, like we were saying, we were actually working with a binary is either high process risk or no high process risk. So what happened is that for medical device high process risk, the guidance is saying, well, those actually has to go to script testing. Robust script testing and limited script testing is kind of like some example that they provide in terms of testing approach for those. If not, it's a not high process risk. And the guidance is say, well, follow on script testing. Perform either ad hoc testing, error guessing, or exploratory testing. Here, I would like to say that also in the guidance, it's important to provide, okay, why? It's kind of the rational, right? That we're saying, why do they recommend one approach versus the other? And it's because, okay, the level of assurance rigor, right? If you're dealing with an application that is high process risk, is you have to have more rigor because the foreseeable medical device risk or drug product risk, I added this, potential. So just generally entail greater rigor for assurance, right? So we have to make sure, and then a greater amount of objective evidence has to be collected, or documentation. Again, it's because based on risk, and the guidance recommend perform script testing. For not high process risk, the guidance said, well, use a method that is suitable for the risk of the intended use. So, and they were saying, well, generally tells less collection of objective evidence for computer software assurance effort. And I know this will be kind of, difficult or tricky for some of us because it would be very subjective based on risk. But I think that we get some learning on how to determine doing the aligning, right, our risk-based approach and to determine the assurance activity necessary. It will take some learning that we get, that we feel confident to determine how do we actually commiserate the assurance activities. I mean, how much testing do we need in according to the intended use of the system. What I'm trying to say, this is not actually very black and white. We need to perform some effort into critical thinking and regarding to determine the assurance activities. Okay, moving forward next. Okay, so here we have the type of assurance activities that they're saying, and I will stop here very briefly, right? Script testing is actually prescribed written instruction in a test case. This is nothing new. This is a way that we have been conducting most of the CSP activities so far for the last 20 years, 15 to 20 years or so. And they say, well, they kind of describe we have robust script testing in which actually that's this thing about the approved test script that we have been working with, a limited script testing, and this is will be kind of new for us. And I like this one is a hybrid approach of a script and a script testing, right? So this kind of testing allow us to combine features from the script testing and from on the script testing on the other side. Um, on script testing is dynamic testing in which tester actions are not prescribed by read instruction in a test case. So we have ad hoc testing, we have error guessing, and exploratory testing as here as example. And then for definition of this, I would like to go and recommend you go to GAN 5 second edition because actually this is this my definition that I'm providing here came from the GAN 5. Okay, so here I like to discuss regarding a concept that is in the guidance. So when you read the guidance, you see that every time this will be mentioned a couple of times, the concept of software future functions and operation risk-based approach. So I like to highlight this as a CSA benefit. And what happened is that since the software may contain different sets of features, functions, and operations under a CSA risk-based approach, testing modalities, for example, script and non-script testing, testing modalities could be combined for software assurance verification. And we will see this in the next example, but I would like you to, keep this in mind because when you were performing, remember that we were actually walking through the flow chart. You can do it, of course, for the software, but actually you can screen that through the functions too, right? You perform that risk-based approach assessment per software functions too, and you'll see the benefit of that on the next slide. All right, here we are. So I'm bringing here an example for in a system to see this actually in practice and how is this how is the benefit of this approach that I'm mentioning, right? So let's think about an endotoxin testing software. So this software is being used at the batch release stage to ensure that the medical device are free of dangerous endotoxins. You can see this is my intended use. This is what we expect the software to perform, the intended use. And then we have which when introduced into contact with a patient cause fever, meningitis, hemorrhagic, shock blood pressure drop, and other dangerous effects. So this is the foreseeable risk impact. So you can tell, right, by just reading this is a high process risk. We're dealing with with a software that is a high process risk. But then what happened is that in CSA, now we can say, well, wait a minute, within the software, only 50% of the software functions are directly related to the toxin testing and batch release. So what happened is that, okay, those are the functions that are medical device risk, high process risk, and the other 85% of the software features are supportive operational related features. We're talking about security, reporting, backup. Those are not directly related to the intended use to the system, right? So those are not high process risk. And I would like you to take a look here to this chart because this chart, let's think about the software assurance activities. So this is your validation effort, right? All the things that you have tested for that system. In the past, as we have been doing so far, everything has goes through firmware testing, but now we're saying, wait, we're going to be performing test scripts for those high process risk function script testing, and that's only 50% of the complete effort. And then like we're saying, the other 85% we can verify those on a script testing. So this just to give you an idea on how we can actually a CSA benefit allow us to combine testing approach based on risk. Okay. All right. So this is all that I would like to discuss regarding the CSA as it's come from the guidance. Let's part the guidance for a bit and let's talk about actually about the business case. So what is a business case? A business case is a document that explains the value or benefit a company will gain if they pursue a significant business investment or initiative. Business case may contain information about strategic alignment, assessment of exposure, financial feasibility, return on investment, expected key performance measures, alternative approach. The business case may state the intended value contribution of the project outcome in qualitative or quantitative terms or both, and then key stakeholders will use the business case to determine whether to move forward with an initiative. And before I continue moving forward with the presentation, there's a takeaway that I would like you to have from this presentation, right? And I know, so actually some of you in this webinar already are implementing CSA, but just make sure that actually the CSA is of value to your organization before to start implementing, right? And we're going to be discussing this as part, okay, why the business case is necessary, but make sure that before to start, understand, okay, CSA is of value to the organization as of today, and because of that, we proceeded to with the implementation. Okay, so why your company needs a CSA business case? So the answer is that your company needs a CSA business case to define their PIA or the PIA, and that is an acronym for your position statement, informed decision, and articulate the implementation strategy. So your position statement is a way to assess and determine your company position statement regards implementing or not CSA. The informed decision, take an informed CSA implementation go no go decision, and then articulate the implementation strategy, which is define a high level of review implementation course of action. Okay, I'm gonna take a look to this. All right, let's continue moving forward. So let's talk about your position statement. So your position statement, the purpose is perform an internal company assessment to review the company career status from the company point of view of several factors that will support and strengthen the company position in regards whether adopting CSA now is a value to the organization. And now is very important because the business case is kind of like a snapshot as of today, and that situation might change in the next 12 months or so. All right. So the CSA business case elements, right? What do we have in the position statement? Facts. So we have to collect, analyze facts and data that will support the informed decision process, right? They have to be data driven. So I'm thinking here, the idea here is to collect, okay, what's your lead time at the moment for conducting your CSB projects, right? How much it takes, right? If you have any incident related to your actual process related to computer system validation or your system already in place, that you're saying, well, we have so many incidents that increase our system are at risk, and we understand that because there are some trends that we to actually manage, it makes sense to implement CSA, right? So think about metrics that you actually can measure in order to support your to put in your business case. Acknowledge CSA, and for me this is very important because what you're saying is that your company, by doing so, you're saying, okay, your company is acknowledging that CSA exists, is something that is happening already in the industry, and you are saying, well, we acknowledge CSA at the moment, and because of that, we're performing this exercise. Industry review. This is very important to kind of take the health of what is the industry at the moment, take the temperature regarding CSA. So review of the current status of CSA adoption in the industry based on information available and or benchmarking, right? So again, the idea is to by doing this exercise, you would be able to say, okay, where is the CSA at this moment in the industry? And again, it will help you to depends on your company mindset, how aggressive is for change or how conservative it is. It will help you to take that decision. Okay, company-related strategic and compliance initiative review, right? So make sure to understand, okay, review your strategic objective, audit quality initiative and IT initiative, adoption of Industry 4.0 and Quality 4.0. And the idea is to understand, okay, CSA fits well because we're performing all these, or you're saying, no, we are going to so much work at this particular moment in time that we have decided this is not a good time to pursue CSA because we don't have, this would be another competing priority. So it probably makes sense to wait another year or so to do that. Okay, other aspects are more into the financial aspect, like return on investment. So, okay, if we're performing CSA, what are the benefits? Are we actually, does this make sense to get into perform this investment right now at the moment? So let's say because of the benefits, right? And I'm thinking here about operational. So you have a streamlined processes. So you may be probably having some benefits by implementing CSA at your side. So for example, I'm thinking here operational, streamline CSP, CSA processes, shorter validation verification cycle times, being system put into service faster. I think that your stakeholders, system owner would be happy to listen to this. Here it is. Financial, less documentation. For example, for risk-based testing and through adoption of tools for validation life management cycle, validation life cycle management and testing automation, if you get that far. Compliance, better approaches for identification of software and system risk. And finally here, I am mentioning regarding risk. So the idea here is you have to analyze potential risk of not adopting CSA and vice versa, right? So you have to tell your management, well, these are the risks that we are actually there. You understand there's some potential risk, but pursuing or not CSA today. Okay, so let's talk about the informed decision, right? And typically this is happening when you get the go or no go decision from management. So what happened is that the idea is to take a go or no go informed decision in regards of how CSA adoption would be of value to the organization. Now, I will start to discussing first what happened is there's a no-go decision. So business case has demonstrated that the CSA adoption is not of value to the company as of today. And then you need to answer why, the rationale, right? And then what would be the next step? So, for example, wait and see how the CSA adoption progress in the industry, and then revise the business case in the next 12 months or so. So this is some idea that what you can actually do in case there's a no-go decision from management. If there's a go decision, well, business case is strong enough to move forward with CSA implementation. So you need to answer, well, when, the timeline, and then the how, this for example, scope, budgets, and resources. And that's what happened on the next step, which is to articulate your implementation strategy, right? So now we are here defining our implementation strategy. So for example, the idea is that to have define a high level review description of how CSA will be implemented. Here, this is when we get into the operational part, right? Start thinking how we're going to be implementing CSA in our sites. For example, let's think about scope. What will which will be the scope that we're going to be following to implement CSA, right? So we can do it by areas. Think about either company-wide global. We can go by site. We can go program, department, business division, etc. We can be creative here. How do we want to start doing this, implementing CSA? Per system. Regulated, you think about regulated system only. We can define a pilot program. We can start with new system only. So again, we can think about ways to start to implementing this. Release approach. So you can follow releases approach. So let's say that you start with one side and that will be release 1.0, and they keep integrating side areas based on learning. So when you actually keep seeing, okay, how CSA progress, and in kind of incremental approach, and how the CSA progress with that learning, it would help you actually to start increasing, releasing those to other areas, or to, for example, other system or programs. SOPs and training. So you have to think about, okay, new SOPs and training, and the revision, something that you need to think about as part of your strategy. Budget, how much this will cost, right? Think about like a ballpark number for management to understand, okay, how much this will cost to in order to implement this. Resources, full-time employees that you need. Do you need to form a task force team? Just a team that we're gonna be dedicated to helping out from different department, different areas. That's your task force team helping you out roll out CSA in your company. Important, the SMEs, basically because you need to actually develop people that understand the basics and the rationale behind CSA in order that those help you out to release, implement it, and actually the SMEs will be kind of also power users that help you to communicate right and in the learning process to other people in the company. And finally, external consultants. If you need to bring someone in that help you with the project, so you might be actually needing to account for that as well. And finally, timeline, releases and dates, right? So when this was going to be happening, again, at the high level. Okay. Um, all right. So here, I would like you to see this, right? And within the CSA business case, in when you articulate your implementation strategy. So how do you can start actually implement CSA? And I would like to see it from the CSB program impact, right? So you have a CSB program in place in your company. And the idea here, we can actually go two approaches. One is go limited, start, limited discrete, or we can go radical disrupted. And I have two example here that these two diagrams came from the GAM5, right? If you are following like a V model approach, right, that you have planning, specification, configuration, or coding, verification, testing, and reporting, and of course you had the supporting process including risk management. Here when you are seeing the target, this might be the two processes that you need to actually update in your current CSB program to implement CSA, right? So you can actually say, okay, things related to testing and verification and to risk management is where actually I need to start to do to implement CSA. And then because you know the scope of the guidance, when you read it, you notice actually the guidance is very focused in the assurance activities that, in other words, that's testing. Okay, so, or we can go radical. We can say, okay, no, we're gonna go radical, disruptive approach, and we can say, well, we're gonna be going agile, right? We're gonna be performing the things iteratively, so we don't have to wait until planning has its. We get the plan, validation plan, the specification requirement. We can go doing agile, and agile. This is being proposed in GAMP 5 at the moment that we can perform activities iteratively, so and incrementally, so we can actually go in radical and going into agile in that sense. So that means revamping completely your SOP, because CSP program, your computer system validation program, you decided to revamp the whole thing. So I actually bringing you to you as the two possibilities or different flavors you can actually pick and choose, or if not, you can actually just sit right in the middle, right? It depends on how confident you feel into how much you confident you feel into actually updating your CSV program. Okay, so here I'm here. So some tips regarding, okay, in your CSV program you can perform quick wins, right? And this is related to what we discussed before in the previous slide. So you can do things that you can do right now is that include vendor assessment in functional risk assessment. Use vendor document if they are reliable. So you can start actually say, okay, we're gonna be how we're gonna be leveraging the vendor documentation as part of the risk assessment, as part of the risk assessment, and therefore to determine the testing activities that we need to perform. Of the risk assessment templates to marry risk with proximity to drug product medical device risk, right? So again, this is something that you could do, actually start to update your risk assessment to determine like is presented in the guidance. So you see the functions, and based on those functions you determine the risk level and the children's activity. So this is something that you can start to implement in your current risk assessment, and then implement two templates for ad hoc testing and script testing. I know pretty sure that most of us, as part of our validation programs, we already have just test script, but right now we're saying, wait, why not we start to implement this kind of unscript test scripts testing test script as part of the validation program. And finally, my recommendation is also follow CSA guidance when you, along with GAM5 second edition, to implement CSA. And the reason is that when the GAM5 second edition that was released this year in July is pretty much in alignment with CSA. So you can have by complementing the two, so you can feel more confident actually on the CSA approach that you're following in your company. Okay, going back to the business case, right? So every company should perform a CSA business case, and the reason, the operation conditions and the business environment is different for each company. Quality system and CSP program varies per company. Evaluation and decision for CSA implementation is time sensitive, right? So you have to do this assessment as of today. CSA business case should be a high priority and managed with a sense of urgency. Again, it's because you would like to take a decision, like make sure that you perform this assessment to see where you're standing as of today. Okay, who gonna be benefit from the CSA business case? And this is internally, right, within the company, your executive leadership, right? So you want to inform your executive leadership, okay, what is the CSA about? So they are aware and provide, okay, for them to sponsor following up with the with CSA implementation. Communicate a uniform side internal decision, right? So basically, you have a business case, and you were going to be able to say, rather than being you understand where you're going, where you're standing, and where you're going would be easier to communicate that decision. Also, targeted communication for employees division, right? So basically, what could happen is that, okay, validation is aware of CSA or quality is away from CSA, but the other side it is not. So basically, business case will help you out to promote, bring more people on board, like, wake up the slow pace, generate sense of urgency, or then calm the anxious preoccupied, right? So those early adopters that keep saying, "Hey, CSA is here. What we were doing nothing." So and all that. So this is actually one way that we can start to the business case could help you to with that level of communication. And finally, the stakeholders share the CSA business case with executive summary with client auditors and regulatory agencies. Just the executive summary, you can actually share those with your with these stakeholders. Okay. The CSA's business case additional benefits. So we have, okay, the information that you collect as part of your business case can be added to project plans, project charter, the change control impact assessment. Sometimes we need to those when we actually changing either an SOP or a program, SOP updates and validation documentation.